Okay, I'm going to attempt to show a little video of how I do my little rosebuds. Brush is just double loaded with the light color and the dark color. I think I used warm white and Napa red. It's just two colors I like together. And what you're going to do is you're going to start by making what looks like a C stroke, because if you turned it like you were writing, that's the motion that you would make. Sometimes I do turn mine depending on where I'm putting my roses. I put all of my back petals. These are just going to be rosebuds, so they're not going to be like full roses. Mine look doofy, so I do rosebuds. But I do all the backs first, reloading and adding paint as I need to get them just like I want them to be. Then those pretty much have to be dry before you put the top stroke on. And if you want one that doesn't have the both strokes combined, what I do is, let's see if I can get a spot where I can show you, is I just do a little turn like that. And that's going to be just a rosebud that's even smaller than the other two. So I like to freshly rinse and reload my brush. And I'm sorry I can't get all of that in the video, but trying to do this myself with just a cell phone is not the easiest. And for some strange reason, I have lost my little video camera. So anyway, so now I'm going to attempt some of these that are drier than others. I'm going to do the front part of the stroke, which is the exact same stroke, only instead of pushing it away from you, or if you were turning it, doing it as a C, you're going to do it in the opposite direction. So this would be like, on this particular one here, would be like a backward C. Or if I was doing it, let me blend that a little better. If I was doing it with it facing me like this, I would just touch, pull down, and around. You don't have to pull down very far. You want just enough that you create the bowl of the rose so that it actually does look like you were looking down into an open, rosebud or flower bud of some sort. And these are just the double-loaded color. You can make them any color you want and using any size brush. I made some on a huge canvas one time with a great big, like, 2.5, 3-inch brush. They were awesome, but they were just for a storyboard back when I worked at Michael's Arts and Crafts. So it wasn't like I even still have the canvas or know what happened to it, because it was theirs for the store. But once you get, I call it the front half of the rose on, or the rosebud, then look at them, and sometimes it'll be so sheer that you can still kind of see part of the back petal through there. Once it's dry, just go back over it, and it will actually deepen that front color and not bother your back color at all. And then it kind of camouflages that and you can't see it. So that's just how the actual rosebuds themselves are done. Now, bear with me a second. And I should have had more paint colors out. I love the Hauser greens, especially the dark one. It just seems to be like the perfect shade of dark green for doing foliage with. But I love all of them. But green's my favorite color, so I'm going to use green no matter what. Okay, and I double load the greens on the brush. And then I turn the piece actually upside down to me when I do this because it just makes it easier. So I'll start at the one that would be the furthest away from my hand because, yes, I do have a tendency to drag my hand through it if I'm not very careful. Just touch and pull around that outside edge of each rosebud. And I just keep picking up paint and kind of brush mixing it to do these, or this part of my rosebuds. And then for this little one down here, it doesn't really, and I know my hand is getting all kind of in the way, isn't it? It's more or less just a touch and lift. There's not a whole lot to the stroke. This one has a little bit more of the rose bowl showing through. So just like when you did the front sides of the rosebud, you can go back and strengthen that color just by keeping the brush in the exact same spot and making the same little stroke. And this is not really a stroke for me per se. It's more just a touch, press it, and then quickly lift it off the surface. So for my little stemmy areas, I'm just going to, I kind of like do a little flick with the brush. I don't do a stroke, not using this particular brush, but I do like to come back in and do those little, I used to know the word for those, but for lack of better terms, I call them little hangy down things underneath the rosebud, because right now I can't think of all my terminology from when I worked at the garden center. So they're just the little hangy down things under a rosebud. Okay, then I like to take some of those same greens and a little bit of water and get me a thin mix going. And then that's when I will pull in some little vine work, the little actual rose stems coming up under the rose. Once I get those in place, then I just kind of fill in different areas with anything that I might want to put a leaf on, or just to create some background of little stems, lemmy looking things, that sort of thing. And I just do that until I feel like there's enough for what I'm wanting to do at that particular time. Then once those are in place, then I'm going to take that same brush that I did the roses with. Sorry, sometimes I can't talk and load the brush at the same time. It's kind of like that holding your breath when you paint. Then just basically do your little leaf stroke where you touch, press, pull, and lift. Touch, press, pull, and lift. Touch, press, pull, and lift. Same stroke that I used to watch Priscilla Hauser do on the Carol Duvall show years ago, and I would run, go get a brush and paint, and sometimes I wouldn't even end up with greens. I would just grab 2 different colors of paint so that I could sit in front of the TV and watch her and try to do it along with her, because when I first started doing all this, I didn't have a computer. I didn't get my first computer until I think it was late 93. So once I did, though, it opened up a whole new world for me. But that's just, and then you can make as many or as few of the little leaves as you want to make. And that's basically it as far as painting the little rosebuds and the leaves. And then I like to go back and sometimes I'll add little, I call these my little do-nothing dots. And this is just for interest or just to keep the eye moving, because that's one thing in painting, or what I have learned about painting, is you want to do something that keeps the eye moving and keeps interest in the entire painting, not just in one area. So I like to do little things that, what I call, create some movement. So I would do that, and then you can take, I had a scruffy brush I was going to do it with, but I can't find it. But anyway, you can take some sort of stipple brush. This is a Deerfoot stippler. I've been trying to practice with them some because I love Linda Lover's work that she does with stipple brushes. Nowhere near as good, but I use them just to add some background that I didn't have to paint over. So that's the reason I do this after and not before, so that I didn't have to worry about painting over it. And it's just little light things that, like I said, just help keep the movement and the interest. And then I love to do spattering. I still do it with a damp toothbrush. It's just me and the way I do it. So once I've got it loaded with the paint, then I'll spatter a little more heavily in some areas, and then others let it not be quite as heavy. There was one more thing I wanted to show y'all, if I could find where I put my sponge. Here we go. You can give this kind of a vintagey feel by taking, and I like to do this with craft sponges, which are these little sponges. They usually come a whole circle, and I cut mine apart because I'm very frugal. Basically, I'm stingy, and I don't like to end up wasting a piece of sponge because I have forgotten to rinse it. So I cut these into smaller pieces, plus I got used to doing that when I was so into the rubber stamping. But you would take a brown color paint, you dampen the sponge, then remove all the excess water. Then I just load some color into the sponge. You would actually want this to be good and dry. It's still got a little dampness, but we're only going to work on the edge. You take this is just a chipboard ATC, but you can do this even with wood pieces. Hold it straight and steady in one hand. Take your sponge and run that sponge along that outside edge. I'll try to do this and not get in those little red dots that are still damp. When you need more paint, pick more paint up, because you're actually not starting with very much paint on the sponge. But do that all around that edge. And then when you're done, oh, a little hair there, it kind of gives you a little vintage feel to your ATC or any of your wood pieces for that matter. Okay, that's it.